economic or political fluctuation. They are not a problem of insecurity. Those things, there's been problem about the nature of local government before these issues became escalated. And these problems can be posed as analytical issues without any recourse to external factors such as ungoverned space, especially from the opening page, page 1. That's number one. Number two, the discussion of the problem, that is the problem of local government. I call it problem. I don't want to call it question because that's actually a bit confusing. So seems to occur, that discussion seems to occur, as far as I can tell from what I read, in what I call historical vacuum. In the presentation, some of that, what I would call historical background, is fleshed in, but not sufficiently. So I'll draw the author's attention to page 5, for instance, where they make a reference to the 1976 local government reform. Okay, this is a very well-known historical period in the history, or moment, or context in the history of local government system in Nigeria. But there's no discussion of what that reform entailed. So that's one that I think needs to be factored in. For that somewhat anecdotal use or mention or sentence to be meaningful, the reference, I think, should build on a historical background. There should be a discussion of the evolution of local government system and the factors that went into play in that evolution. For instance, if a reform was undertaken in 1976, as we know it was, and I think it was the late Sardauna of Sokoto who was the chairman, right?
1976 was during the military regime of Obasanjo and Shehu Yaradua.
Yeah, that's
then
right.
It was 1984 that the Sultan of Sokoto, Dasuki.
Okay.
The former Sultan Dasuki. Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, but I'm more interested in not so much in the person, but I'm more interested in the period, the 1976. Yes. Yes, sir. So that reform was undertaken in the context of return to civilian rule, because after the Obasanjo took over, they were basically preparing the country for actually what would be a civilian rule. So the question to raise, which will make this critique, this historical background very useful, is what was the basis of that reform? Yes. And what practice was found to be wanting? Was there a local government system before that? If not, so why was that considered to be interesting? And I guess that the important thing about it is that I'm confident, and I'll say this in my subsequent point, that document itself, okay, that was produced, whether you call it blueprint, whether you call it white paper, yes, or a report, will be detailed about the context, about the reasons, the genealogy for that reform that was undertaken in 1976. Yes. But at the same time, in terms of the literature, and this is the third point that I want to be making, I would say that the literature is not comprehensive enough. I would be surprised if the 4 articles and the dissertation that are listed in the reference section are all that there is about the subject of local government in Nigeria. I haven't really made effort to study that problem on its own, but I do know that there will be much more, that in fact there's ought to be more. There is much more about it. And in the reference that I can see, I am assuming that there's more that the author can share at some point, that the literature needs to be a bit more comprehensive than that. A suggestion I would make, and this is what I was saying earlier, is that this literature include the report of the Local Government Reform Commission itself, because Nigerian bureaucracies used to be, I don't know about now, but I'm assuming that being bureaucracies, they would still like to be thorough. They are very good about procedure, and I can be sure there's a good chance that the context that's missing is likely to be present in that document when reviewed and used as part of the literature. In fact, to press this point further, this final point about making literature more comprehensive, the rationale of a dissertation or a doctoral thesis that's going to be outstanding at this level should be to subject the traditional literature, especially those from the theoretical persuasion, that is, if you want, the non-Nigerian citations here, and there's several of them, okay? Because you are working within a field and you need to be informed about that field itself, that is, in terms of the discipline of political science itself. So it should be the purpose of this kind of work should be to subject such literature to extensive critique that is based on the reality on the ground of actual investigation. So I'm saying that, in fact, the purpose of this dissertation, if it were to be excellent to outstanding, would be to actually use the Nigerian experience to begin to question the assumptions behind the literature itself, behind the field itself. So for this reason, the further revision that I hope will be useful, making that I suggested at the beginning, should focus on analyzing the primary data. The discussion section, from what I read, was clearly based on if you want, a distillation to some extent of the primary data from those identified sources, maybe interviews and other kinds of data that you've been able to generate. But their use ought to manifest much more visibly in the writing. And I think that one of the things that will be useful going forward, making this a stronger part of your piece, will be to actually show how the material that you gather at the level of primary data will go on to actually enrich the dissertation itself, but further on to begin to push the assumption behind the literature further. Okay, so that's all I have. As I said, I read this as a paper, and comments at the end, and all of what I've been saying, I'll pass on to Mrs. Bernard so she can transfer that to you. I think that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir. It's a pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Thank you very much, Prof. I know you have to leave because of your meeting, but thank you for the it's extensive, the comments you gave, and I'm sure that Nuruddin took notes. And the ones you said you will send to me, I will forward them to him as soon as I get. So thank you very much for taking your time to read the work. Really,
no problem.
Sorry, do you mind if I say one or two things before Professor Adesokan leaves, please?
Okay, sir.
Just a kind of an intervention. We can't thank you enough, Prof, for your comments. And I know, but my response and appeal would be to other members of the Institute, the fellows, as I hope most of them are listening. What we are going to see and what we are seeing today is that these kinds of responses and comments, you will not get it from reviews that are sent to you by journals. Once you submit an article and you get that, you're not going to get these kinds of comprehensive response and comments. The other thing is that we are also listening to professors who, irrespective of their field, whether they're in literature and this thing, are able to comment on works that are done in the humanities and the social sciences, and even in science, in core physical and biological sciences. So I am happy that Professor Adesokan agreed to come on board. I know he's so busy. He's so busy, and I kept asking if Bernard, if he had responded. So, Prof, I want to thank you because you will not be around. When we make the final remarks. Thank you very much. We are very grateful for
it's
having
a pleasure. You. It's a pleasure to do this, and again, I have it's a pleasure for me to do it, and I also learn a lot from the author. And well, thank you, and thanks to both Mrs. Bernard and Professor Adubi who made me do this. And
thank you.
It's a pleasure to do it. Thank you. I'm unfortunately unable to stay through. I would really have loved to, but I just can't because I have so many meetings, and I'm actually playing truant in some meetings now to be able to go to others. But I'll be here until maybe 10:55, and then I'll leave. But I'll stay a few more minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So the next respondent is Dr. Ajwa Opoku Ajimen. I'm sorry. She received her PhD from University of Toronto Center for Comparative Literature. Her research currently centers on humor and laughter in African literature. She finds primary material in many traditional sources and has started exploring less conventional ones. Ajua also works for Cambridge Journal of Postcolonial Literary Inquiry. She is interested in translation studies and has taught classes in French and in English. Dr. Ajua, you're welcome. You have 15 minutes to make your responses, and I'm sorry for the name. I'm sorry.
No, you pronounced it perfectly. I just wanted to mention that I'm commenting on the other paper, so I don't know if I should go ahead anyway, or if I should wait.
So sorry, I think I missed that off. Maybe that's
it's fine.
Dr. Babatunde then. I'm sorry. Is that? I'm sorry, 1 minute. I'm so sorry. Let me just check. Okay.
Yes, it should be Dr. Babatunde commenting.
Babatunde, okay, so I'm sorry, Dr. Babatunde, for the mix-up, and Dr. Ajua. So Dr. Babatunde, you're welcome. She holds a PhD in Peace and Conflict Studies from the University of Ibadan and currently lectures at the Center of Peace and Strategic Studies at the University of Ilorin. She's a member of Society for Peace Studies and Practice, the International Peace Research Association, and many other associations. She was a senior fellow at the French Institute for Nigeria for Research in Africa, IFRA. She has also been awarded several academic grants and fellowships. So she was awarded 2017 fellowship at Brown International Advanced Research Institute of Brown University. And she's the author of Environmental Conflict and the Challenges of Sustainable Development in the Niger Delta. Our research interests include conflict resolution with an emphasis on traditional model of conflict resolution, resources governance, human rights and security, peace building, and gender. Dr. Babatunde, you're welcome. I'm sorry, you have 15 minutes to respond.
Thank you very much. I appreciate and thank the organizer for the opportunity to be part of this very laudable program. And especially I thank Professor Omolade Adubi for this opportunity. And I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Professor Yeronke Ademo. So thank you. And then it's also a pleasure to finally meet Professor Odupono in this. So thank you very much. So this topic on the local government system in Nigeria, PAPEX and ACLE. I think this work is a very, very important work that focuses on the critical issues, particularly in terms of local government, and looking at the fact that local government should play a key role in the providing good governance at the local level that can actually promote the well-being of the grassroots. And in Nigeria, realities where most of the endemic protracted conflicts emanate from the local community level. So it's a very important topic. But I observed something, a disconnect between what the presenter, the essay or article. There's some issues that actually constitute some of the comments I will make on the work that I finally saw some of it being discussed in the presentation. First, I will first to the topic itself, saying that local government system, the word PAPEX and AFLEX, when we consider the local government system in Nigeria, when you are saying it's confused, saying somehow very, very unclear, I think you have to be looking at it with the broader challenges with Nigeria form of governance system, the broader challenges with our democracy, because then you can see that what it's meant to be and what it is, there is a major disconnect. And then this will help us to understand is actually the local government system that is perfect, or we can say we look at it within the broader political system, governance system in Nigeria and our democracy. And I think the presenter touched on some of this issue in the presentation, even though it was not captured in the article. So I also discovered that the title did not actually fit well with the contents of the essay, because also claiming that it is applause in a way is unlucky. And we look at it within the reality of how local governance is practiced in Nigeria. I think if you probe deep to examine this issue, you see that even for the people in charge of this local governance in this position, they don't see it that they are unlucky. They consider that they are fortunate because their election into this position is seen as a form of patronage system in which they are rewarded for their loyalties to the state governors, because of the support they gave during the election. So when we look at the reality of our local government and the complex social, economic, political issues that shape local governance, I think the title is a bit not actually well fitted to the context. Then when you look at the objective of the studies, I think it's not well and clearly articulated to understand exactly what this study is all about. For example, in your abstract, you mentioned that you want to examine all those factors that actually affect local government capacity to deliver local government and good governance. Then along the line, you also cited another, looking at you want to interrogate the agitation for scrapping of local government, something. Then in the last one, you also mentioned you want to examine the structure of local government, something. So it's not clearly connected for us to know what exactly is the main focus of this study. And I think Professor Adek has already highlighted the key issues with the gaps in all the sections in the work. So I will focus my own comment more on looking at even the focus, the central question, the argument. Also, you argue that failure of local government is a failure of state government. And I want for you to look at within the reality of Africa and Nigerian political system, electoral system. So it extended beyond failure of state government. And for example, you emphasize the fact that up until 2002, the federal government, their financial autonomy, and they are able to. But what led to a situation whereby the state government started to take over the function or financial aspect of local government? You have to, when you probe deep into this issue, you understand the fact that the local government, the corruption, leadership crisis that permeates Nigeria state from the national state level also is met at the local level. Because, for example, there was a time when you listed the functions of local government, you mentioned their responsibility in terms of primary education, secondary, when SUPEB was still under the control of the local government, when they are handling the payment to teachers. This local government, they are sure that the state government should take control over this aspect, so that before they give any money, when money enter into the CBN in the state and the local government joint account, they first remove the salary of the primary school teacher and pay them and give the rest too. So you see, there is a lot of oversimplification of some of this issue in the article, so that when you send this kind of bill, to say what you are doing, Do you understand this issue, the complex nature? Are you able to bring it out, marshal it in a way to frame your argument in a very clear and logical way? And this argument is an oversimplification of the reality. So the problem, the failure of local government extends beyond the failure of state. You must also situate issue of the dysfunctional nature of Nigeria political system, electoral democratic system, which shape what local governments, even at the state level. And before I go, so you need to unpack all this issue in a way that will strengthen your argument, even at the same time when you make your focus clear. In terms of your method using primary and secondary, I look at you excluded the grassroots people. And you say you are doing a research focusing on some of the factors that intersect with the weak local government. So how do you generate valid data that will help you to capture this issue if you are not even including the local people that are affected as part of the research subject? And also, when you say local government in the whole of Nigeria, are you going to capture local government within the 36 states to be able to have a representative sample? Are you going to examine all local governments in the so you did not indicate this, which is very, very important. Then at the same time, in your essay, you mentioned issue about beyond structure, issues of beyond the problem with the structure of local government. You did not bring out issues because election into local government is not really election per se. It is more about politics of selection. We have state government select their supporters, people with questionable characters who are not actually elected, but unpick and impose on the people. So this kind of thing impacts on the capacity of this, because most of these people do not have the leadership attribute, capacity to lead, to deliver, and their loyalty is more to the states and to the people. They don't have any sense of responsibility to the people they go. And when Professor Adeso, we're talking about looking at the 1976 local government. So you have to bring out this issue from historical and the trend over time and how this intersects with weak governance at the local level. And then you also raise the issues about fiscal imbalance, which are answered by pointing out, for example, the case of Superb Deliver. They just put them as a form of way to reward them and also to use them, exploit them when they want to seek election and so. So they are where they do not have that capacity. So that is why sometimes they take over. And also in a context where there is overlap between functions of state and local government, where they cannot both do it. The state government that impose them on the people, they have that mindset that some of this response, if we don't want, we have to take it over. We know the money we are giving to them is just for their own personal enrichment. If you have done interview with some local government official, which I have done, you can never see them admitting that they collect a kobo from the state government. When you meet them, you say they are waiting. For the last 7 months, we have not been paid. We are still waiting for money from the state government, which is far from the truth. Because anything coming in is just seen as their own reward for what their loyalty. So you must look at the complexity of these issues. And I also want to say that it goes beyond, in your conclusion, you mentioned, is it just about restructure of the operational aspect of intergovernmental relation between states? No, that is far from the reality. So it goes beyond issue of restructuring the operational aspect. It has to do with looking at the electoral issue, the functional nature from the party system, the way these people are elected.
I think we lost Dr. Babatunde just then. Maybe give her a couple of seconds, see if we can get her back. I don't think, okay. Maybe we just continue with the next presentation and she can maybe give her comments after or send them to me to send to you. Okay, we lost that. All right, then we move to the next presentation and hopefully Dr. Babatunde is still able to join us before the next. So the next presenter is Ndirangu Ungujiri. He is a doctoral student at the University of Nairobi with a research interest in equity and poverty, economic growth, innovations, and national competitiveness. He is a regular publisher and columnist with Business Daily Africa, among others. He frequently speaks and makes presentations at international conferences. He's a member of Institute of Directors of Internal Auditors. He is also a partner, Watermark Consultant, and serves as Chairman, Investment and AMP, Security Standard Committee, and many others. He will be presenting a research today that is titled, Digital Taxation in Tackling Illicit Financial Flows in Developing Countries. Ndirangu, you have 10 minutes to make your presentation. Please keep to the time so that we don't keep your respondents waiting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for the introduction, that good introduction. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending from your geographical location. I wish to welcome you to my presentation, and I believe able to see it. Maybe you can confirm, Bennett. Are you able to see my presentation, please?
We can see your screen, yes.
We
can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
But is it possible to also see your face?
Maybe I do. Maybe what I should do, just stop sharing, then I come back. Is it okay, Prof?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
Very good.
Thank you. Let me now share. There we go. Thank you so much. And I wish to thank the organizers, especially Professor Urupune, for this noble idea whereby we bring the scholars in Africa to think on how we can help our countries, and be participating in the globally in bring more change in this world. This evening, I'm going to present a topic on digital taxation and illicit financial flow in developing countries, more so in Africa. In my introduction, digital marketplace is any platform that allows the seller and the buyer to interact, to conduct business electronically through the mobile payment platform. They make the payment, they can buy using the platform, and they never meet face to face. This is what we call digital marketplace. And we have realized after COVID-19, this is a marketplace that most people are going, and this is the future of business. Whereas after this, you see that we find that we have this financial flow, because whenever you're doing a digital marketplace, you don't know the other person, you don't know the source of the other person funds, and it's try to encourage to have not limited to crime. The crime is there, corruption and tax evasion are very high due to this, and this is a concern all over the world. And how can we reduce the illicit finance flow when we go to digital marketplace? And to curb the IFF, the use of digital technologies is one of the preferred methods, and ways such as closing loopholes in the tax treaties between countries and in developing countries and developed countries at the same time. And this problem is more so in low developed, because you find the developed countries, they come to the developing countries to claim their money through it is financial flows through the various kind of investments. IFF occur mostly through invoicing, dealing in contraband goods and transfer pricing, corruption, human and drug trafficking. This is more so common in Kenya, it's more so common in Africa, Nigeria, the same case is there, it's very high. And digitalization targets the universal registration, whereby we can have a local farms and foreign farms. We have in the developed country, we not lose revenue due to tax evasion. For example, you find that the foreign companies operate in Africa, in developing countries, they don't declare their taxation in the host countries. They declare in the country of origin. This is making the developing country lose a lot of tax and also a lot of profits. The research we review, publish, and gray areas will explore the issue of digital taxation in this area and how to curb it. Introduction of digital services taxation it will strengthen the international financial flow and have the technical cooperation between various physical systems in developing and developed countries. Digital technologies and the challenges, maybe we can go there together. One, you have interconnection of fraud. Whenever you do a digital transaction, it just takes a matter of seconds, that transaction is complete. And you can never know if it's a fraud or not. You know that it's a fraud when it is finished. And if it's a tax evasion, the same thing will happen. You never know it was tax evasion from before the transaction is complete. And the sure is a number of illegal transfer of money. Technology does not care about the source of the illegal income. And this automation, the speed, there's a big challenge that across borders and nature of digital currencies. And we find that right now we have what we call in casinos, e-gaming and online website, whereby many people are doing the online gaming and online betting. And also the e-commerce is happening online. The significance of this study, one is improving the livelihood of people in developing countries because of the tax evasion to be avoided. And also the other important is to various stakeholders, including the policymakers and other interested parties to be of use in this study and also contribute in the existing literature. And we find that the existing literature is very minimal in this area. So in a way, we want to contribute in the tax evasion authorities in different developing countries, and as well as enhance the tax collection capability and socio-economic outcomes. The objective of study, establish how digital taxation has helped developing countries curb the IFF in their countries, and also establish the digital technology facilitates its financial flow. How does digital technology facilitate the IFF in different countries? And finally, establish if introduction of digital taxation will be able to reduce the flow of financial financial flows. And when we talk about, maybe to explain a bit, when we talk about digital taxation, and we're trying to see how can we have taxation at source instead of paying the taxation before, after the transaction. How can we do the taxation at source of the transaction? The methodology of the study, the script is designed to establish the relationship between the country introducing digital taxation and reducing IFF. The target of the study was more so secondary data from Kenya and other developing countries. The year of study was 2014, was used as a base year, and the current focus is on adopting digital technologies and the higher revenue beyond 2021. So the study period was 2014 to 2021. The tax rate were among the sampled countries looked as corporate and individual tax rates in each of the countries that we studied. The database of the current study were found from published more so from the World Bank and individual countries, maybe from their national statistics bureaus, be able to get some of the database. And the data was analyzed using SPSS. The finding, the accurate measures of IFFs remain problematic despite some of the magnitude of data design available. That's make a big challenge. And the key facility of this financial flow include the government agencies. We have the police, we have the military, we have the tax authorities in different developing countries. And for example, when you go to a country like Somalia, you find military and police, they are more so involved in this. And also developing countries, they're losing more because it engages several multinational companies, whereby these multinational companies are in infrastructure, and also you have the PPs, they are involved, and these multinational companies, they plow back the profits and the taxation back to the country, to their country of origin. And also you find the loans that are used to finance the projects, they come with the countries fund the project, and the money doesn't come to a financial system. It goes back to the country of origin financial system. There is also direct correlation in government providing an enabling environment for technology access and usage, which is reducing the IFF in different countries. The political will to build legitimate and effective developing countries and the effective tax is ranking, which is foreign tax evasion. You find that it's more political problem, and thus the political will is lacking in all this. And the impact of IFFs on social, political, and economic development, again, is quite severe, making the country depend more so on foreign aid. Because of this, you find that every African country, every developing country, we must rely on foreign aid for us to grow for any infrastructure we are doing. And if we're able to manage to reduce the IFFs in our countries, we are not able to reduce on our dependency on foreign aids as developing countries. Our recommendation: the strength of tax systems, such as using digital taxation system, social media surveillance, is one of the areas that we need to work on. When you talk of social media surveillance, sometimes you see, especially individuals, somebody is having a high-end life, driving the big cars, living a high-end life, but the tax that they declare at the end of the month or the end of the year is minimal. So use of social media surveillance is able to help us. Sorry. Sorry.
We can hear you.
Okay. Go on, carry on.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. The issue of social media, we're able to help curb these individuals and corporate. We find that we have those individuals with high-end life. How can we get them? And also the correction of curb the tax evasion and the capital flight, because you realize that most of the capital flight goes from the multinational companies. They go with the capital flight. So we need to reduce this, and use of digital taxation will help reduce this. Also, there's need to create awareness available to international instruments, whereby the countries in developed countries and developed countries, we need to create awareness of this in this financial flow in our countries, and how to curb this system, and how can we have treaties on how to curb FFs in different countries. The fight should include multi-policies area, whereby different countries can have policies, they collaborating their policies, and design and implement these policies and actions at the government levels. So it should be government working relationship to curb this financial flow. And also we need to have the reforming of government policies, intervention to curb FFs. And when we talk about reforming, we need the political goodwill. The political goodwill will be able to help us curb the FFs in different countries. And also they find that we have the engaging of offshore account. We find, especially in Africa, most of the political class and other business community, they have offshore account. As the offshore account should be declared from the country of origin, whereby we're able to know and track this and able to see the source of the money, if it's fraud, either is tax evasion, and able to see it. And also we find that most of the companies operating in the developing countries, they have their registration is in offshore. So how can we make that even if a company is operating in a country, let have the registration in the country of operation, not having an offshore account operating in developing country. The challenges: The data captured there was full amount of public funds and cross-border irregularly impacting negativity on development in the countries, and also have the point on the factor investigated in the literature review. And we find that future research in this field need to address these gaps, and which more so because it's a new area, it's less done, less we need to capture in the future research. In our closing remarks, we say that the research study shows how moving from the traditional means of doing business through digital technology has facilitated this in developing nations. And this is due to the semi-weak regulations in the developing countries. And we need to make our regulatory more strong, to be strong, so that the digital platforms will be able to capture more, and that was crucial revenue. For example, you find we have countries that have companies like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. They operate in Africa, in developing countries, but they don't have physical office. They don't declare their profit that they get from our countries to us. So we need to have a strong regulatory system that we're able to see this company that also operate in digital space, that they are able to declare their profit and their operations in our countries, in the developing countries. And that is it. Asanteni sana. That's it. Thank you so much for listening to me. And I'm here for question and session. Thank you so much. Back to you, Dr.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation. And now I'll call Dr. Ajwa to respond. I already read your citation, so just you have 15 minutes to respond to Ngijiri's presentation. Please stop sharing your screen so we can. Yeah. Dr. Ajwa.
Yes.
Okay.
So can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please.
Thank you very much. And I'll just start by saying thank you for the invitation. It's nice to see some familiar faces and to meet new ones, particularly Indirangu, whose synopsis I had the pleasure of reading. I know it's not easy to put yourself in a position where strangers critique your work to your face. I will start by saying that I find what you've written to have the potential to be a fine article. Digital taxation in developing countries is a timely topic. I will note that I have a couple of the same issues as Professor Adeshokan had previously, which is that I'm working with a very short synopsis, which means that much has necessarily been left out. And also some of the questions I had were answered in the presentation that you just made. For example, when you talk about the uncertainty behind identification, the declaration of taxes abroad, multinationals like Facebook and so on, these are some things that I had questions about, but you've already answered. So if it sounds like from time to time I'm speaking to something different from what we just heard, it's because of some changes that have been made, some self-correction on the part of the author, but that's always a good thing. Now, my feedback can be considered as that of the non-specialist reader who will still be interested in engaging with the topic, because the movement of illicit finances certainly concerns all of us, as you show very well, even in this small space. And that means that my advice will be geared more towards the structure and the scope of the paper. And also some of the studies and the write-ups that I suggest may already be familiar to you, to Indirangu, the author, and you may have discarded them for specific reasons. But still, if any of my suggestions strike you as useful, I'll be happy to tidy up my notes for you. Now, my first observation is about the way that the paper is going to be organized. In the problem statement, you observe that the illegal flow of funds is, you say it's occurring in all countries, but it's severe in developing countries. And that explains your motivation and the scope of your research. And you mentioned that the target population of the study was data from all developing countries. And then you notice that that's too large, then you narrow it down to 12. My suggestion, however, within the context of a single article, would be to pick fewer countries or even just one, for example, Kenya, and to focus exclusively on that. Now, I have two main reasons for suggesting that. The first is that while a sample as broad as the one you suggest could potentially be treated in a single article, it sounds better suited to something like a magazine article or a thesis, which allows, in fact, it requires more background literature reviews, and you have more space to cast your net, so to speak, to different countries and to treat them extensively. My second reason for suggesting that you trim the primary material is that I noticed you almost instinctively keep using Kenya as a sort of benchmark or starting block. You cite it as an example a few times, but I noted you didn't cite any other country as an example. And in fact, the entire background section is about Kenya. You also signal the fact that there's difference there when you mention that the impact of this illicit movement appears to be more severe in sub-Saharan countries, and in particular, Kenya could be losing more than other developing countries. So all of that already orients the reader in the direction of Kenya or sub-Saharan countries. And even though you eventually branch out and you mentioned that the study will include Europe and Asia and other African countries, the document that I received doesn't show how much data you've collected, but I think that having more clear-cut boundaries will produce a paper that is more streamlined, both for you as the writer and also for the reader. So I found a few titles on illicit financial flows in Kenya. Forgive my pronunciation of the authors' names. There's one from an author from the Africa Growth Institute of Brookings called Taxing Mobile Phone Transactions in Africa, Lessons from Kenya. Here, the author seems to view the taxation of mobile transactions as negative. There's one from Justice Gatsuyu called Taxing a Digital Economy, Exploring Intangible Assets to Broaden Revenue Base in Kenya. Here, he seems to be all for taxation, and he's leaning more towards your work. And in fact, in your slide, you mentioned that digital taxation strengthens international cooperation. There's also one from Tiberius Barasa called Illicit Financial Flows in Kenya, Mapping of the Literature, Synthesis of the Evidence, and he provides an overview of previous research, et cetera, et cetera. So if you start with such targeted research, what you could do to paint a more concise image, you could, for example, look at Kenya before and after digital taxation. And in fact, there's a gem of that already in your abstract, because you say you want to describe how migration from traditional means of trading to digital avenues has facilitated illicit financial flows. So something, and another thing that you mentioned in your introduction could be tied to that and become your focus, because you say that even before the introduction of a digital tax, taxation was already covered in the income tax legislation. So you could look at the two, do a sort of comparison and see if there's any, in the end, what sort of change are we looking at? And this terrain is still new enough that your study is still going to be relevant, because the examples I just gave were published in 2008 and 2019, that's to say pre the Finance Act of 2020. Now, all of that said, you've clearly done a lot of research on other countries. And of course, you should bring up other contexts, the Silk Road, criminal activity in other countries and so on for reference, and also to contextualize your own study. And precisely because all of this is so new, you can use what you know about other places, in terms of motivation for their digital tax and so on. All that will help you be more specific and to inform your research on whichever countries that you eventually choose to study. And in any case, the rest of my suggestions will pertain whether or not you choose to maintain all this data from all these countries or whether you choose to narrow your focus. Now, you have two research questions, and one of them I think is stronger than the other. Question one is, do digital technologies facilitate illicit financial flows? Now, not only have you strongly hinted at the answer throughout the document, I think that taking a step back shows us that the answer must be yes, because if significant income were not being lost, they wouldn't have imposed a digital tax. So I would advise you to give all this background to explain specifically what led to the imposition of the digital tax. You tend to speak a bit vaguely about losses, which is not criticism. After all, this is not a finished article, but even math challenged readers like me like to see figures occasionally. How much money are states losing and in what activities? This you answered already. You said there's some going into gambling and so on. I didn't have that in the document. So I was asking, is it more mobile money transfers? Where exactly is the money being lost to? How significant a place do digital technologies occupy in these economies? And what is triggering the various authorities to act? And then you move on to answering research question 2, which is what anyone being hit by sudden taxes wants to know. And you put it well, you say, does the introduction of digital taxation reduce the flow of illicit financial flows? And in answering this, you can raise related questions. What are the short-term effects? How much has been generated by taxation? How airtight are the collection attempts? What has been the response from the users of these digital technologies? Specifically, the criminals that you allude to. Are they becoming more tech savvy? And here you can refer to the research that sees digital taxation in a more negative light. So I'm not going to all the 15 minutes. In terms of material, you have an extensive general bibliography, but are there primary sources? For example, could you look for media reports with quotes? You could use a media website and maybe look for the phrases that journalists would most commonly use to describe illicit financial flows, for example, corruption. And here too, studies from different countries with older digital taxation systems, that's to say older than 2020, could buttress your own observations. And these media reports will help you compare the effects and the perception of digital and regular tax systems. Alternatively, you could compare Kenya with a secondary country, probably one that it shares borders with, preferably a country with no digital taxation if possible. And again, you could look at the major newspaper there, for example, the Kenyan Star versus the Monitor in Uganda. Now, I like that, sorry. You specify that the term illicit financial flows is a relatively new concept. And if I understood well, it's only about 6 years old. I think you could do more with this. You could do a scholar search for illicit financial flows, count how many articles on the topic have been published in the last few years before and after digital taxation was passed. Have they gone up or down? And what are the implications of that for your study, if any? Now, of course, we know that online data have their limits, particularly with developing countries, but a search of trends around the term Kenya corrupt over the last 5 years shows that there hasn't been that much of a change in the last year, even after the tax was imposed. So why might that be? That's another related question you can think about. So in the end, you can see that my suggestions are for you to stick to what you've already proposed. I thought that the descriptive design you mentioned in your methodology was a good choice, but focus it more narrowly if possible. And I think that that will have impacts on your results section. Now, in terms of the significant section, you know, those of you in the sciences and social sciences should feel free to correct me if this is common practice. But I find that the significance, as you've put it in the document I received, it signals a little bit more strongly than you will want that you are a young scholar. Now, I don't mean that in a dismissive way, but what I mean is that the grand confident statements like the research study is significant in improving the livelihoods of people in developing countries. The research is important to various stakeholders, including policymakers. The study hopes to assist developing countries, et cetera, et cetera. I find statements of that nature, in my experience, and to be fair to you, in my area, are more likely to get an article tossed even before the desk editor takes the time to really read it and see what it's about and whether it's worth sending for review. And even if everything that you are saying is true, I would recommend putting it in more restrained, more demonstrable terms to bridge the gap between the reality on the ground and the material that you are proposing so that it doesn't look too abstract or too idealized. And for you, this could mean highlighting the purpose of the study, which is how illicit flows can be curbed with digital technology. So speaking concretely and considering how many academic articles there are out there, what niche does your article fill? So I'll just end by saying that I think you should be proud of the work that you've done so far. But as you know, an article is very different from a larger work like a thesis. And if you want this published by a reputable journal, and you should, then you shouldn't hesitate to get your hands dirty again and to make some substantial changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adra.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm sure Peter Ango has taken a lot of notes, and he will make the comments you have made. And if you have further comments to send to him, you can also send it to my email. I'll make sure he gets them. So thank you very much. Your comments were very extensive. And last but not the least, of course, is Professor Stein Howard. He is a professor in the Department of Afro-American and African Studies in the Department of Epidemiology at the University of Michigan. He is a development economist educated in Canada, the US, and the UK, who has taught in both Asia and Africa. He is the editor and author of more than a dozen books and edited collections and more than 100 journal articles, book chapters, and reviews. His research on Africa has focused on foreign aid, finance, structural adjustment, and neoliberalism, RCTS, health, gender, and development, health and the environment, institutional transformation, industrial policy, export processing zones, and other industrial parks, agricultural policy, poverty and rural property rights transformation, income and equality, and Chinese investment in manufacturing. It teaches a variety of courses in that and epidemiology, including the history of African economic development, Africa and post-war development theory and policy, globalization and African health, the political economy of African development and health, and socio-economic development. Professor Stein?
Okay, thanks very much.
You have 15 minutes to respond.
Okay.
Thank you.
As you see, I have a low attention span, which is why I do so many different subjects, and I move on to the next one. So, thanks very much for inviting me to participate in this, I think, really good efforts to assist young scholars to upgrade their publications, to develop their research further. And I'm very pleased to finally be participating in this Institute of Advanced Studies bi-monthly seminar series. Thanks very much for the invitation from my colleague, Dr. Adumbe. Thank you very much also from Professor Lipuna and his participation organizing this. And also to you, Olubunmi, for working so hard to put it all together. Let me first begin by echoing a bit of the comments that Dr. Adwoye was saying, and she made some very good points. This is a very broad approach to the subject, and I think she's made some very good recommendations to narrow it down. I will also do the same thing. Basically, it should be emphasized that the issues at the heart of the proposal are extremely important. It's about the use of digital taxation systems to raise revenues while reducing the illicit outflows from African countries. Now, at the heart of the article really is three extremely important constructs that need a lot of development. One is the taxation systems, illicit flows, and the issue of e-commerce and finance. Unfortunately, and again, just echoing Dr. Adwoye's analysis here, that we only really got a very bare bones view of the research that's been undertaken. It was a very competitive, short survey. And hence it's a bit limited in terms of what we have to say. It might be a lot more there that we just don't know about. So unfortunately, what I'd argue is that none of the constructs in what I've received are properly conceptualized and making it difficult to propose policies dealing with what is suggested in the article, the multiplicity of challenges in each of these realms and how they interact. To begin with, taxation as a revenue source and as a regulatory mechanism that creates incentives and disincentives for productive or unproductive economic behavior has been at really the center of policy discussions and debates for decades in Africa. The challenges of taxation in Africa are challenging even beyond the arrival of e-commerce and due to the really informal nature of transactions and how income is generated on the continent. It's made worse by what was the destruction of the formal economy by the promoters of structural adjustment that turned African countries for 2 decades into a testing ground for neoliberalism. Options for taxation are really delimited also by the collection capacities of government agencies and the political economy taxation, which is very much linked to the comparative power of entrenched interests that both oppose tax proposals or might be in favor of tax proposals. There's really a huge literature, and perhaps it's done in the PhD research, but it's not really referenced here. There really are dozens of books on African taxation historically, from classic work of John Dewey's 1963 on taxation, economic development in tropical Africa, to Milton Taylor's Taxation for Economic Development 1970, to the work of Deborah Bradigan's Taxation, State Building in Developing Countries 2008, a terrific group of work being done, has been done for quite a long time by Mick Moore, who's been dealing with this big African taxation project at IIAS. Is a really good book, Taxing Africa, Coercion, Reform, and Development, which came out in 2018 with Wilson Pritchard and Odd Helge Scheldit. And there's really an extensive group of publications, again, not referenced in any way in the proposal coming out of the International Center for Tax and Development that Mick has run. A second real issue, which also is not really in the proposal, is one of illicit financial flows, and the literature it's not really beginning in 2015 or 16. The path-breaking work was really done by economists Leon Sidikumana and James Boyce, University of Massachusetts, which really showed how problematic and systemic the problem is, all the way back to the 2003 study. The process really generates debt in Africa, also fuels amounts of capital flows. Willing participates both on the African countries, private banks, international players have generated large fees and interest returns on loans and deposits. It's also been driven by a series of motivations that often have less to do with the needs of Africa and more the needs of political priorities of the USA and Western countries, along with sometimes corrupt military governments, which of course led to a lot of dubious generation of debt. Both Ndikumana and Boyce examined data from 23 African countries covering the 1970 to 96 period, estimate that every dollar that is generated, debt generates 80 cents of additional capital flight. They point basically to 4 different linkages between loans and capital flights. I have limited time, I won't go through it. I'll make available a long document analyzing the different approaches they take. But they start basically, starting point really arises from the observation between the huge divergence between the balance of payments data of African countries and World Bank's Global Development Finance on changes to the stock of debt. And to get the calculations, they do a lot of work basically, they examine a number of sources of emissions, such as misinvoicing of foreign transactions of importers and exporters. Exporters, for example, tend to underreport lower price or quantity exported in order to avoid paying taxes and surrendering foreign exchange authorities. Importers over-invoice typically with higher prices or quantity imported. So there's enormous analysis here. And again, I don't find any of this in this proposed article abstract, this proposed outline, that's generated really a massive analysis of illicit flows in multiple ways. And since then, of course, there was a big follow-up AERC study, which has had more than a dozen working papers on the subject, that's available online. The third issue, really also not sort of, in my view, properly conceptualized, is the issue of digitalization of banking and commerce in Africa. And of course, that's rapidly transforming the landscape all over Africa, for example, beginning with Kenya's Safaricom's M-Pesa revolution. There's really an extensive literature on it, dozens of journal articles, large research projects, and it's actually the subject of big studies that have come out of the IFC and the MasterCard Foundation on the issue of financialization, finance digitally, and along with the incredibly important issue of financial inclusion. So the article really proposed is not really clear in how these realms are conceptualized or how they interact. The narrative begins with discussions about a new Kenya digital tax. A digital tax is defined as a digital tax implies a tax levied on income from the digital marketplace. However, typically digital taxes are not on income, but come in other forms, including consumption taxes, service taxes, tax preferences for certain types of digital businesses to encourage them, gross-based withholding taxes, et cetera. The Kenya case is a digital service tax charging 1.5% of the gross transactional value of the income earned through the digital marketplace. Beyond this, we really know little about the tax in the proposal that's put forward. I'd like to hear much more in there on the background on who proposed the tax. Was it a donor? Was it a requirement of the donors? Was it agencies of the government proposed it? Which agencies were involved? Who were the proponents and the opponents of it? How did the legislation evolve? What is included and why? For example, it does not include, we know, banking related or government related service transactions. What are the challenges in collecting the revenue? How does this case inform the rest of the study? None of this is really developed. The next section of the paper moves to a problem statement focused on the issue of illicit financial flows. I'm really not quite sure how that relates to the Kenya tax, which seems to focus on generating revenue from legal transactions. One needs to talk of all the different routes and types of illicit flows. As noted above, basically, it's not just an internet phenomenon. We then move to the purpose of the study to determine how digital taxes can curb digital flows, which have eroded much needed revenue. I do not really understand the problem statement in some senses. How would a tax curb illicit financial flows? Wouldn't it encourage even more transaction using questionable routes to avoid taxation? The issue of revenue in its absence is much more complicated, one would argue, than merely a digitalization of commerce. Generating revenues via taxation has always been a challenge, even during the colonial times. It's one of the reasons government used import and export taxes, because these goods were readily identifiable and easier to tax. And basically, it's also complicated by the informalization of economies from adjustment. They've tried a host of other measures to raise revenues, such as value-added taxes, but there's really no discussion of this. It's a complicated question, not just how it relates to illicit flows. The two research questions listed actually do not really look at government revenues, but focus on the facilitation of illicit flows through technology and if digital taxation will reduce the flows. It's really not clear from this what is meant by illicit flows, which comes later, which types of digital taxes are being considered. Proper hypotheses need to be generated along with the methods which will be used in the paper to reject or accept the hypothesis. So what are the main arguments? It's stated that the significance of the study is aimed at improving the livelihoods of people in developing countries. How does a research study of this article improve those livelihoods? It is the idea that you can gain government revenues, which can be spent on people with more money, or which will stay in the country, or can lead to greater employment simply because that money is available then. We then move to the illicit flows, which shifts from a focus on strictly illegal flows, and now includes activities which, while not strictly illegal, in all cases are against norms and rules such as tax avoidance. Here we're moving down kind of the slippery slope from criminal to other types of activities that might be legal. From the work we know of in the Kamina and Boyce, it's better to define the linkages, understand the mechanisms, and then think about how to curb them rather than coming up with some general category. This is done anywhere. This really isn't done anywhere in the proposal. We then move to the discussion of research design and how digital taxes can reduce illicit flows. The relationship really is not properly conceptualized. The starting point against is to define the types of illicit financial flows and how digital world has helped to facilitate these flows. There's some discussion of random sampling methods, but it's really not clear what's being randomly sampled. The study would be much better served with a depth analysis, as have been suggested before, more narrowly at the nature of flows in one particular country. There's also a list of key findings in recommendation study which raise more questions than answers. For example, it's stated the most common means used to evade tax in the jurisdictions, including misinvoicing, trade in illicit goods, transfer pricing, corruption, and traffic of humans and drugs. I don't think traffic in human drugs are done to evade taxes. Obviously not. Transfer pricing is clearly about evading taxes, but misinvoicing can be done for a plethora of reasons. Everything basically from fraud to avoiding foreign exchange transaction restrictions. It's also stated the political will to build legitimate effective states and not effective tax regimes are lacking, fueling tax evasion. but the evidence points at weak institutions in the countries and looting and rent extraction. So how do you define legitimate and effective states? What is the theoretical lens here? What does this have to do with how the digital world is creating opportunities for flows to leave a country? Why is discussing a digital tax even relevant to this kind of Weltanschauung? Elsewhere, he states the government should strengthen tax systems such as digital taxation systems, surveillance, and collection to curb tax evasion of the capital flows. As Gustaf said, basically, it's not clear to me how that is being defined and how a digital tax or how it would be designed to curb capital flows. Curbing tax evasion is very different than curbing capital flight. It's also stated in the recommendations the need for reforming government policy interventions to curb IFIs to make them effective. The government policies that facilitate the illicit financial flows are not identified, and doesn't make any difference, as stated above, if you simply have this Weltanschauung of, well, political will is lacking, there are weak institutions in the countries, and looting and rent extraction is widespread. In summary, what I'd argue is there's a lot of conflating of key issues like taxing e-commerce, taxation as a mechanism of regulating illicit flows, tax avoidance as a generator of illicit flows, whether illicit flows are assisted by the digital world, how to define and measure illicit flows, etc. A lot of the flows are also linked to this issue, which is not discussed, which is supply chain, international trade from one country basically to another. We know most of, perhaps close to 2/3 of international trade, we do have this misinvoicing, has to deal with the issue of supply chain. This is one company's division simply trading to another company's division. This idea often in mainstream economics of, well, it's simply one country trading with another is nonsense. It's not what the world is made of today. So how to deal with financial flows associated with movements of goods when so much of it is aimed at transfer pricing and tax avoidance? It's really not clear to me in their article what will be done and why, for example, you want to look at so many different countries. Instead, what I'd recommend is basically focusing on one country, try to understand the nature of the illicit capital flows before even dealing with the issues of curbing flows, using tax avoidance, and generating more revenues for the government. Thanks, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Professor Stein, for your comments. And thank you for everything. And I hope you were able to get some few things from the things you said. And since we don't have questions or comments right now from any of the attendees, do you want to take 2 minutes to respond to any of the comments? 2 minutes. Then we will ask Nuruddin to take 2 minutes to respond to his comments as well. Do you?
Okay, thank you.
No,
yeah.
No, I thought Ubujiri was going first to respond to the last comments.
Okay.
Can you hear me, Ubujiri? I'm not sure you can hear me. Okay, I think Nuruddin, then you have to, yeah. Nuruddin.
Yeah.
Okay, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Indeed, a pleasure to be given this wonderful opportunity, and we'll continue to thank the Institute, and we'll continue to thank our grandfather, Prof. Jacob Olukono, for the wonderful opportunity. I've received all the comments, and I await to receive the other one, and I think the comments are well received, and I will try my possible best to update the paper. I think the lapses are due to the page limit that we are given to submit the synopsis. So I will gladly impute all the comments received. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you very much too. Ubujiri, are you ready to?
Yeah. Sorry for that. I think my mouse turned on. Thank you so much for the respondents. It was very rich input that has come in through, and I've been able to record it, and we'll be having them in the full paper. Maybe the big challenge is also the input there in my paper, my final paper that I'm almost done. But because of the what was required by the Institute for this purpose, for this webinar. It didn't capture everything, but in my final paper, most of the issues discussed are well captured, and I believe with time we'll share with the Institute, and we see if it's ready for publication. Thank you so much once again for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your response. Professor, I think it's Professor Ladimo. Can you hear me? Do you wish to say anything before?
Okay. No, I just want to say thank you to all the respondents. We appreciate all the inputs. I also want to encourage the presenters to countenance all the comments as much as possible. And very soon we hope to receive news of the publications of these papers. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your response. And Professor Adubi.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks to the responders. And my recommendation to the presenters is that I hope they will take all of the comments into consideration in making a revision. And if you have further questions from the responders, please do not hesitate to contact them. Don't think but they are so far away, therefore they cannot be reached. So if you have any clarification to make on the basis of what they commented on, just feel free to reach out to them. Say, please, I need clarification, or what other literature can I access in order to revise by this paper to make it publishable. And of course, if you want them to read the full length of the paper and give you comments before you submit to any journal that you want to submit to, please feel free to reach out to them, and to reach out to members of the Institute too, not just the responders. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Professor Lukona.
Yes, thank you. I am wondering, are there members of a group who are listening who would like to raise one or two questions? I know time is up, but do we have any of the fellow out there listening to us who is interested in asking a question? Or what?
I did ask if anybody wanted to, but they didn't.
Yes, I saw your. Okay. So
but we have Professor
okay, I know
Professor Konye, do you have comments, sir? I'm not sure.
No.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you, sir. Okay, sir.
Oh, okay. Let me join Professor Oladema and Professor Adumbi, the professors in charge of this particular program, and of course, our own Bumi Bernard, for putting up what a really wonderful and interesting section. I want to thank specifically our respondents. I'm so glad to meet you here, and I'm so happy to hear your comments and your responses to the work of these young scholars. You already know why we're here. You know why we're doing this. And I don't take things for granted. I know this is a very busy time for all of you. We are going to be contacting you to be part of our larger group. There's no going back. We're already getting results. This is the 5th year. And I just want to thank you, to really, really, really thank you for coming to join us. And let me also thank the presenters. Please recognize that we regard you to be part of these up and coming scholars, and I hope you will take these comments seriously. I know fully well that this is the way to go. Anytime I send my paper to any of my colleagues to read, and I still do that, and then they return and say, excellent, beautiful, what do you say? And I write back to them, what are you talking about? You don't have something to say about what I've just said? What about, this is the tradition. We don't, there's nothing wrong in being, critiqued and being made to look very critically at your paper and, and coming up with something more profound. If you allow me to do it the way I normally do it, which is I always appeal to African proverbs to make my point, because I've been in so much in what I call indigenous semiotics, the Yoruba language, and I'm going to ask Bumi to translate that for me, that says, Ogbo Ologban ni ki je ka pe agba ni were. Bumi, can you tell me how that will go in English?
Well, sir, I am not an English expert.
Okay, maybe Professor.
If you had said it in English, I would have translated into Yoruba.
Okay. It simply means what it's just saying to us is that, like King Solomon's wisdom and judgment, that you in a panel like this, you listen to, the elder will listen to all the people talking and commenting on a particular matter. And when he gives or she gives the summary of it, the whole crowd will say, oh my God, what a wisdom, how profound. So the Yorubas will now say that it is the collective wisdom of the people, of the elders, of the people around, that will make the audience to say that the elder or whoever is presiding over it has said the most profound thing and made the most profound comments. So the collective wisdom of all in the African sense and the African worldview, it's very important. And this is why I will bring experts in there to say that anytime you read an article, in most cases in a journal, I can assure you that 1/10 of what is in there, are comments that have been generated by others who have read that. Just listening to all the respondents today, I say, oh my God, they are looking at it from different angles, from different perspectives. What we often call the interdisciplinary, study or multidisciplinary study, and they're commenting on that from, various angles. And now is your turn to take them seriously and use what they have said today. So I can't thank them enough. We are very happy that we are making progress. And to other fellows who are not here, please, you see this, you should not be afraid to come forward. You shouldn't make Bumi to be scouting around for presenters. You should consider it a good opportunity for you to come and present your work. I can assure you, if I'm part of this group, the respondents will say the same. They won't say because I'm a Harvard professor or I'm an old man now, I'm 70, I'll be 71 in a few days' time, that they are going to spare me. No, I don't expect them to spare me at all. I expect them to tell me that, hey, professor, this paper is not good enough. These comments will benefit from this and this and this and that. That's what scholarship means. So thank you again, and thank Bernard for helping us put this webinar in place. And we just hope for the best as we continue to run our program this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I think I have to take courses in English now so that I can maybe in the future be able to translate your.
Oh, no, don't worry. I will do my translation myself. Don't worry.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah,
thank you to the presenters, because without you, we would not be here. You make this webinar series, you make them realistic, because if we don't have you, the respondents won't have anything to respond to. So thank you very much for being courageous, I would say, and submitting your synopsis for for comments. Thank you very much. And to our correspondents, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. It's early in the morning and early for most of you and maybe late already for others. But I know we maybe took the early part of your day, but we are very, very grateful for you giving us your time. Time is money, like an African proverb will say. So I know how much you have spent on us today. So thank you very, very much. And to Professor Lupono, to thank you for giving us this platform to be able to discuss and make to make the elders' comments profound, or find them profound or something. I hope I'm correct. So thank you very much. And the coordinators to thank you. Fellows, thank you for coming. And I wish to make an announcement before we leave. We will have the call for the next webinar out today. So please check the social media platforms, that is WhatsApp and Telegram pages, to know when. You can start sending in your synopsis immediately or as soon as you can before the end of the before the deadline. Also, we are hoping that for the next edition of the webinar, we'll have a lecture. We will communicate that to you as well. So please just stay tuned to the social media platforms, and we will communicate every information we need you to have there. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, and good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, and good night. See you next during the next webinar. And sorry, before I go, also I wanted to say one of our coordinators' birthday is tomorrow, Professor Adeshino. So yeah, if you are in Ibadan, tell him we said happy birthday to him in advance. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, Obani. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Everybody,
Thank
thanks
you.
all for your
Bye-bye.
comments.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Baba, is that stop recording? You are still recording. I see leave. I see stop working. Àwọn chat wa wọ̀nyí. Mo ní ká ka àwọn chat wa wọ̀nyí. Thank you. Oh, actually, coordinated. I do well.
We can end.
We still have about
Some people. Please come and be good, all of you.